Who are we really, and why are we here? Is destiny a real thing? If you've been asking any of these questions, what's to come might have some answers for you. What is up, Ascenders? You're now listening to Awaken, a show in which we have conversations to assist you in awakening your consciousness into your highest purpose and potential. My name is Brian Henry. I'm the founder of Together We Ascend. I'm also a transformation coach and your host of the show. If this is your first time tuning in and you're someone that is on a path of spiritual and personal growth and would like to continue to receive content that's being created to support you on this journey, I invite you to subscribe to the channel on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform, wherever it is you're listening to this from. And if you're a returning listener, welcome back, family. If you've been listening in and have been enjoying this show and it's been supporting you in your process, I would greatly appreciate it if you took a moment to leave us a review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. This really helps us in growing the show, getting it out to more people, and continuing to create this content. In this episode, I'm speaking to Ginette Biro, who is a powerful medium. She is super tapped into her clair gifts, clairaudience, clairsentience, claircognizance, clairvoyance. I think I got them all. In addition to this, she is also someone that has had a profound near-death experience, or an NDE, in which she saw some pretty incredible stuff, including how our soul blueprints work and how they are created. In this conversation that I got to have with her, we dive into a deeper understanding of our soul's journey and why we are even here in these physical bodies. Get ready, because it's likely going to activate in you a greater understanding. It did for me, and I'm looking forward to be bringing it to you. So what do you say we jump in? This is Awaken with Ginette Biro. Ginette Biro is a powerful medium who is claircognizant, clairvoyant, clairaudient, and clairsentient. Every day she sees things most others don't see, hears things that most others don't hear, and feels things that most others don't feel. She's a bridge between worlds and can perceive of information beyond our physical dimension. In addition to these remarkable gifts, Ginette was able to gain a deeper understanding of how her life blueprint and soul journey works during a near-death experience she had years ago. She now utilizes her abilities and shares her unique insight to guide others on their life path. As a teacher, Ginette is able to take complex, esoteric topics and explain them in an easy-to-understand way, and has the ability to answer the questions that intrigue, haunt, mesmerize, and inspire. And now I have the honor and pleasure to have her on the podcast to do just that. Ginette, thank you for joining me. Welcome to Awaken.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so looking forward to this conversation. I really am.
Me too. So before we jump in, I do want to acknowledge you for something. In the last few weeks, I've been checking out more of your content in preparation for this. And yeah, I guess I just want to acknowledge you for the way that you really do take some of the questions that I know a lot of people are asking, and they're asking you. And you do really provide a nice, easy, and clear way of understanding these topics. I've heard you speak to connecting with our spirit guides and tapping into our intuition, and if pets can reincarnate. And yeah, I thought I wanted to acknowledge you for the way that you do deliver these answers in such a digestible way, and thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. It's been something that's important to me ever since the beginning with my spirit guides. Like, I wanted to not just understand some far out concept, but apply it. Like, what does it really mean? Would be the question I would ask them. Like, what does that really mean? And so I have to give a lot of the credit to them for the metaphors they use and the applicable ways to understand a concept. So thank you for that. But it really has to do the credit really goes to my teachers in spirit.
I'm going to say that the humility is likely one of the reasons why you're able to bring through this profound wisdom and insight.
We'll go with that. Sure. Sure. Thank
Okay,
you.
so I think this is where I want to kick off. I know that you get asked about your NDE, just so that we don't have to use the full term for the rest of the conversation for anyone who's listening. NDE is the acronym for near-death experience. Um, I know it's something that you share about a lot, and that was a pivotal moment for you in the sort of understanding that it provided you. I'm sure we're going to talk about it, but I thought we'd start off on a bit of a different note, maybe ask you something that you don't get asked as often. I would love for you to share with us what's some of the most challenging things that you've had to go through.
Mm, that's a good question. So, I mean, there are many. And, I actually think this is such a beautiful question because I think often we assume others have it easier than us in many ways. We see somebody maybe online or something, and it must be easy for them because. And and again, I'm speaking more generally here because I know I've done that with other people, only to then hear what they've actually been through. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like you just never know. And so I have had some really challenging times with my health, which is kind of what led to my NDE being at, the very bottom of my ability to be a mom. And I mean, I was so sick in bed at one point, I couldn't get up to walk very far to the washroom without my heart feeling like it couldn't, like it was going to give out. Or almost passing out at my son's school when he was in kindergarten because the walk from my car into the school was too much and they wanted to call an ambulance. And I was just like, no, this is about my son. And so some of the low moments were just such guilt for feeling like a failure of a parent because I was so sick that I couldn't be the mom that I wanted to be. So there are those really low moments. I've also had really challenging moments in embracing my gift and times when spirit would up the ante on my understandings. And part of that was when they brought in different types of guides or spirit energies, whether people call them ETs or interdimensional or light beings or anything beyond what I was comfortable at that point of spirit guide and angel, right? Like these moments where I had to really question in my mind, what is real, what is not? Am I willing to break out of the safety that is the box of my known reality and question everything I've known about who I am in those moments, right? So I've had many different profound moments of discomfort and challenge. However, and there have been many more than the ones I mentioned. However, those have always taught me that in that moment, if I choose to see and take in everything that's happening and like almost put a logic piece to it, it's like, well, what do I know now? Now that I know this, what do I want to do about it? What can I do in this moment? And so if I go back to the ones with spirit, in those moments when it was too much for my mind, I would gather all the information I had and I would put it on this metaphorical shelf. And I would say, it's too much for me right now, but I'm going to put it right here. And when I'm ready, I will go back and get it.
Mm.
And so that conscious choice in there helped. And same with when I was really sick. I remember this moment when I was laying in bed and, I was just like, I don't know how this could get worse. I had a moment of like, but wait a minute. How lucky am I in this moment to have the comfiest bed I can possibly imagine and warm, dry blankets that so many people don't get to have and a family that cares about me and understanding children. Like, how lucky am I in this moment to have this? And so that's why I say some of those most challenging moments also became the most enlightening,
Mm.
liberating, and perspective changing moments. So as much as I'm like, oh, there's some things I cringe, but then I'm like, you know what? But I learned so much. Like I can't just shroud it in challenge because it was challenge but liberation every step of the way.
Yeah, I mean, as it really is the challenges that invoke in us our growth and expansion. I don't want to say that's the only way we're going to grow in these lifetimes, but it really, from my experience, and it seems like yours and so many others speak to it. When we look back at some of the moments and things that has had the greatest impact on us, in a positive way,
Mhm.
It's often the hardships and the challenges that we think of, and that's why one of the reasons why I felt called to ask you that question. And another reason was because of exactly what you just mentioned. I think sometimes listeners can look at teachers like yourself and distance themselves from you, and that's them, that's not me. But I think speaking to some of the challenging times and shadows that we had to walk through really opens people up to realizing that you too had to go through your own journey.
Yeah.
um
And I think I continue to also. And I think that's another thing is it's like it's not about reaching a final point. Like I will continue to learn things about the spirit world, say, and it will continue to ask me in different moments, are you willing to step out of the box that you have now created as your reality into a new
mm,
one? Right? And I think life in general will always challenge us for the next thing and the next thing. And so we are as much as we are teachers of what we know, we are always students of what we are learning. And the two of them are always playing, right? Like there's things I look back on of understandings I had of spirit many moons ago to the way I see it now. And I'm like, wow, is that ever a huge difference? Right. So I think there's like, we never stop learning. And so I think to put anybody up on a pedestal um, is I don't want to say it's right or wrong, but why not be equals? Because we all have something to learn from each other and we all have something we can teach each other. And therefore, would
yeah.
we not be in a circle versus one above, one below?
hmm you mentioned there a couple of times that type of challenge of being called into a reality beyond the, as you put it, the box that you were living in. Um, could you give us a specific example of that?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So when I was really coming to terms with my mediumship and seeing spirits and being able to call myself a medium, right? Like at first, when I first stepped into mediumship, I remember I went and had a meeting with this man who is a medium, and I was like, I just want to know everything you do. Like, tell me about your story. And I remember we met at a coffee shop, and we had this conversation, and everything he said, I was like, in my mind, I was like, oh my gosh, me too, me too, me too. And this conversation was so liberating because it was like, I'm not making this up. Like he's describing things that I've experienced.
Mm.
And then by the time I left the table and walked out the door, I felt shattered because in that amount of time, I was really struggling against my known reality of there's no way I could be a medium. Only other people are. And by the time I got to the door, I was like, no, I can't. That's not me. It's not me. I'm just whatever. Like I'm just crazy or I'm just very creative or any kind of excuse I could give myself. Right. And so that was like one of the first stages. And I had to wrap my mind around like, wait a minute, you do see things and you do know things that you have proven the accuracy of. So why are you hesitating in recognizing what is happening for you? Right. And so then I was on my journey with mediumship and learning everything I could. And I had some mentors and stuff. And then I remember this one time I had these guides come in, different spirit guides, and they came in cloaked, right? They had kind of almost this like dark sort of canvas looking, kind of like a dark brown canvas looking cloak. And I couldn't see their faces. And I remember they came up to me and I said, who are you? And again, this was all in vision state. And they said, we're not going to show you who we are because you're not ready for it yet, but we would very much love to work with you. But we wish to build confidence between like our hearts and yours so you can trust in who we are. And I remember being a little cocky at the time thinking, no, no, it's fine. I got this mediumship thing. Like, show me what you look like, right? Like I've seen all kinds of things thinking I had. And they're like, no, we're going to take some time to get to know you. So for a period of 3 months, I worked with them. They gave me a lot of information, understandings, and I grew to really trust them near and dear. And then I remember the day, like I remember where I was even in my living room in the house I lived in at the time. And I went into meditation, they were there, and then they went to take their cloaks off. And I remember they didn't look entirely human. They didn't look like, like a gray alien or anything, but you could tell they were humanoid, but they were taller and they had like a blue tinge skin to them, like not a earth skin. And I was like, this is not, uh, this is not in my realm of understanding. This is not
Mm.
okay. And so what happened was I basically panicked and I shut everything down. And I got very angry and I said, thanks so much. This is great. You just ruined it because this is where mediums go crazy because they start talking to aliens. Again, I had my boundaries. Like, yes, I was a medium, but I popped into the next box of what is possible and what is okay
What
and
is comfortable?
what is comfortable. And I didn't know about the world of uh, interdimensional beings or galactic level consciousness. I was just thinking of human people, deceased people, right?
Mhm.
Spirit guides and angels. And so that was another time. And so I remember they told me, they're like, it's okay. Take down all the information we're going to give you, and it's okay. You'll come back when you're ready. And I remember I wrote it all down in the journal. I kind of slammed the journal shut and I put it to the side. And I remember I was mad. It's like, how dare you do this? I can't trust anything I get now because now I'm talking to non-humans. Like, thanks so much. You ruined it. Like, I was mad. And it took about 2 years, but 2 years later, I started to get other information from spirit guides that brought everything they had said back into place, and I was ready to bring that into my reality. And so it was just this process of like opening up my mind, and I've learned now that that continually happens, and I've learned not to fight it now or get angry. I just kind of I'll let them know if I'm like it's a little too much for me. I don't really understand.
Mhm.
But it's a more enjoyable journey now.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what is the resistance then to going beyond those borders, those boundaries? What's the yeah, what has to be overcome in order for you to step beyond that?
So for me, I need to receive like tangible evidence of truth in what is being shown to me. And it also has to have the right energy. So discernment for me is a really big thing, like resonance. Something has to resonate in my being for it to be a part of my truth or not. And
Hmm.
so I will take time with new concepts or new guides. I will take time to get to know them, to see how it flows, to see what information they're bringing through, to see how it is validated. And then I have other spirits that, like other guides of mine that are very near and dear that have been with me in my awareness for over a decade now, that I will bring that information to them in counsel of, what do you think? What is this to you? What do you understand? And so I take my time with it now. Any kind of new information, I don't rush it, but if there's a resonance to it, I will listen. If there's any kind of distortion, I will usually kind of be like, it's not for me. There's a distortion in it. It's not for me. So
And
it's a very internal, resonant understanding.
that distortion is also something you're experiencing through resonance.
Yeah, like if it has a distorted energy to it, like either like jagged pieces or kind of like two parts that just aren't syncing together, kind of like when you push magnets together and they
Hmm.
don't click, and when you're doing the opposite side and they can't link up.
Hmm.
If there's any of that kind of energy or anything that feels warpy, then I know there's a distortion there, and it's either just not for me or it's I call it pesky energy sometimes. Um,
Hmm.
and I just don't interface with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you of course had your journey of channeling this information and connecting to these beings prior to stepping onto the path of sharing this with others, sharing this as a medium. I'm always curious to hear about what that transition was like for you, for all individuals, but for you, was there the any sort of, let's say, fear or concern about how it was going to be received by others? What was that kind of taking that leap for you?
Yeah. So what was interesting, there's a couple different stages of that. I remember at first with my husband when I was like, listen, there are these things that like I kept under the radar of what I could see, hear, and feel, but they're happening all the time. And he was really questioning, like, what the heck is happening to her, kind of thing, right? And um, I remember when it got to a point where I needed to tell my family, like I was going to say it whether I wanted to or not. Like I feel like it was spirit kind of moving through me. And I remember telling them, and it was this like bold step of, in one sense, sort of coming out of the spiritual closet and being like, listen, this is what I can do. I know it might sound crazy to you, but this is who I am. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to trust it, but this is who I am. And so I remember in the beginning, um, some people were really open-minded and supportive and curious, like, tell me more. What is it like for you? What does it look like? And then some other people were a little kind of standoffish because they didn't understand it, because they didn't grow up in a family of mediums or healers or psychics. It's not something we grew up in. We were more loosely religious, if anything. So it wasn't like a known thing. So I think me embracing this broke a lot of boundaries in family. And then I remember it started to show itself through my work. And I would be with clients when I was doing kinesiology and personal training, and I would just be knowing things or seeing people around them. And it slowly started to kind of infiltrate into that. And then I remember there was a point where Spirit was like, are you ready to just be who you are now? Because at this point, I'd already started my first kind of business just of my own under the surface, and it was only by word of mouth. And I got very busy really quickly just by word of mouth for years. But then there was a point where Spirit was like, you need to own who you are. And so I remember I put out this post on Facebook a long time ago. And when I watched the video now, because it was my very beginning days of doing videos, I could see how nervous I was. And I was like, I just want to share that. Yeah, I talk to people that aren't here anymore. And I talk to Spirit, and it's who I am. And I remember it was like this moment of liberation. And there was actually a ton of support in that, which was really surprising. So it's been a journey of like standing in my power and recognizing what that power actually is, and then also undoing the ego aspects that connect to that energy of power, right? Because we have to dismantle the ego pieces in order to embody more of our power so that we're not limited by things. Because to me, when I say power, what I'm talking about is like the source energy, the energy of the universe or the creator, whatever anyone's word is when that energy flows in harmony through and with you is when you're in your power. And I find where the ego comes in sometimes is when we start to try and own it as our own rather than a co-creative force with that. And so, yeah, I mean, that was a big part of my journey, is understanding that. And then after my NDE is when I'd made the deal with my spirit guides. I say a deal, but we had this like agreement that I would come back and I would share more. I would step out of semi-hiding by only doing readings by word of mouth and whoever happened to find me, and I would share, and I would start a podcast, and I would start doing videos, and I would start teaching and talking about what I know and writing the book. And that was a big leap forward, but I felt very ready at that time. So that one was a lot easier. The first ones were like a new baby deer on shaky legs. I felt.
So this video that you put out, the first one, this happened before the NDE.
That was before, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm really glad that we're having this conversation, because I can feel us speaking to so many people that are very likely still in a similar circumstance as you were and I was prior to coming out of the spiritual light worker closet. And so yeah, I guess I'm just curious, what do you have to say to someone that, beneath the surface and behind closed doors, they're experiencing these gifts and abilities, and they feel some part of them calling them to share it and just be themselves. What message do you have for these people?
Oh, first of all, I would say take a deep breath and honor you being present here. Like, honor the fact that you're here and take up the space by being here. Be you and embrace who you are fully, but do so in an energy in a way that feels comfortable. Like don't leap
Mm,
before you're ready.
mm,
Wait till you feel either that readiness, like, sometimes we're ready, but we're nervous and we're hesitant, but we're about to jump off the diving board, but we're the one that walked ourselves up there. Like, jump when you're ready to jump. Don't let someone push you off the diving board. But know that you have come here with these feelings and these sensations and these insights and visions and dreams and healing abilities, whatever they are, for a reason. There is nobody here at this time right now who hasn't agreed in their soul contract to come here and be a change maker at this time. Whether you are a change maker on a really big scale and you start a huge social media platform, or whether you are a change maker in your family and your community, just by being you and people around you benefit. Like there are so many ways, but my encouragement is don't let anyone dim your light. And if at first you are just shining your light brightly for yourself in your bedroom, maybe with your journal or your tarot cards or in meditation, that's fine. Start there. And then
yeah,
eventually slowly step out of it into embodying who you are at your fullest, because there's no mistake that you're here with these gifts.
beautiful. I love that because I can see how we can, one could easily get caught up in self-judgment around, not showing these parts of themselves and expressing them fully. So I'm glad that you touched on the side of it that, you know, when you're ready, and there's something coming through there. Yeah, I guess the other thing that comes up for me is I feel like there might, in some cases, be something that needs to be worked through and processed and resolved in order for that state of readiness to happen. So what do you think it is? Like, what needs to be, I guess I'm going to use the word processed in order for someone to be in that space where perhaps they feel more ready to start sharing and expressing themselves more fully?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I would really say look to where your triggers are. Where are you being triggered? And if we start looking at our triggers as opportunities versus judgment points or shame points or anger points, like if we see what is coming up as an opportunity to learn what is there, we will learn where the blocks are and what is needed to heal them. And sometimes simply what is needed is recognition of something, like you acknowledging it for you. Other times we need to talk to somebody about it or do some somatic work or whatever it may be. But the triggers are the clues. And if we, instead of running from them, run towards them, we'll realize they're not as big as what they maybe seem. And on the other side is healing. And that
Mm.
healing gives us more strength and courage to be who we are.
Yeah, I love that. And what I'd like to add to that is we can invite up that discomfort. Let's say again, someone was in this position where they feel some sort of calling to start sharing, and there's been some block around that. What I would encourage someone to do in that case is like just imagine what would it be like to start sharing. And I think in that we can invite up some of the emotions, some of the energy that might be suppressing our light.
Yeah.
And then it goes right into what you're sharing, taking a look at those triggers and addressing it.
Yeah. And I think too, another thing for a lot of people is often there's a lot of fear involved in recognizing spiritual experiences or gifts or whatever people's terms are for them, but like tuning into the uh, ethereal nature of who we are, right? Sensing things that maybe aren't physically there, seeing things that aren't there. There can be a lot of sort of ingrained fear in that. And so, in that respect, if there's things within the spiritual realm or gifts that you're afraid of, my biggest invitation is to learn everything you can about it. Feed your mind with information. It doesn't mean you have to agree with everything you read, but take it all in, and it'll help you so much in your discernment and rationalization of what's happening. And an example I want to say is like, I remember at first when I was younger, and some days I would be able to see spirit popping up around like in my world, and then other days I couldn't. And I remember I thought I was crazy. is what I was like, well, I must be crazy because some days I must hallucinate then and other days I don't. And upon learning about it and then talking to spirit about it, I was like, how does that happen and what is happening? Like, why can I some days and some days I can't? What's wrong with me? And they said, it's nothing that's wrong with you. It's all to do with frequency. Some days you're very high frequency in your energy. When you're high frequency, you can see what's happening up here. When you are having other days where you're more normal frequency, you can't see what's happening here. It doesn't mean it's not there. It's an adjustment of frequency, right? And then that knowledge then became my power. Because I was like, oh, I'm feeling really high vibey today. More things will most likely happen. Or, you know, I'm feeling really quiet and subdued today. It's going to be a quiet day. Like that knowledge piece is power. So that's why I say, give yourself the gift of knowledge in everything you can read, and it'll help you move forward in your discernment of your own journey.
I gotta say, I'm pleasantly surprised at how you bring forward and value the knowledge piece as someone that I'm willing to guess is quite intuitive. Um, how do you bring those two together?
You know, what I love is my guides once told me, okay, if I back up here, I used to think that I had to channel or intuit everything, right? I was like, well, it has to come from spirit. And they said, what you don't understand is there is so much written word on your planet already. So many of the inspirations that come through all the different authors of different stories, of information, of myths, and all of this is so much of that is intuited information. So there is so much written word that you can read in a very 3D tangible way that you don't have to decode. So go read the written word, and then that will be the basis for what you interpret from what we give you. And it'll help you kind of sift through what is real, what is aligned, what isn't. And so that was a really big thing for me, that the spirit world actually wants to give us a lot of information in the most tangible ways. I mean, spirit can speak in many layers. Like I know sometimes spirit can give a message and you could listen to it literally. You could also listen to it metaphorically. You could listen to it for keywords and signs or symbols in it. Like they can speak in many layers, but they really like to bring through tangible evidence or understanding of what they mean. And so, like when I teach my cosmic consciousness circles once a month, where we do a deep dive into some crazy spiritual concept, they always like to bring through some science pieces to back up the theory of what we're going to talk about, right? Like if we're talking about solar flares and the way in which there is consciousness in the sun and the light consciousness, and the flares are an increase in light consciousness coming to our planet. But the sun also has a scientifically evaluated 11-year cycle, and we are increasing in the midpoint of the solar cycle. Like they also want to say, like, this is also happening scientifically because you live in a 3D tangible world, but this is also happening energetically and consciously, and the two can absolutely coincide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is actually really wild. Yeah, just to put some context, I've had points in my journey where I kind of felt like being too engaged with the tangible knowledge, the books, the podcast, the information being shared was actually, I had this idea that that would actually kind of suppress in me my intuitive channels. The idea being, if I have access to infinite intelligence through intuition and channeling, why would I take time to engage with books? I think part of the idea came from the idea that what if the books were misled? What if the information that's being shared there is not factual? So I'm really interested to hear how you kind of consolidate and actually use the two to support one another. But I think there's one layer deeper that we can address here with regards to still having access to and really bringing through that infinite intelligence, and using these tangible sources of knowledge and wisdom in a way that serves us.
Yeah. And so the tangible book stuff, and I mean, okay, if I back up, you're very right. Sometimes some people will write books that are not based on, say, spiritual truth. Maybe they are really seen through the lens of a specific upbringing or religious belief or something like that. And that does happen all the time. But when we use discernment within ourselves and resonance, we can see what pieces of what is being taught resonates and what doesn't, right? And the more that we tune into what feels right for us, the more we can apply that same feeling to anything else that we read.
Mm-hmm.
So what I will often do with spirit is, it's like when I'm building up Cosmic Consciousness Circle, it's a kind of a co-creation with them. They will give me some insights about, say, a healing technology, and they'll tell me all kinds of things about it, and I'll write it all down. And then they will find a way to refer me to certain either scientific articles or books or concepts to fill in the blank scientifically of what they're speaking about. And then they'll come back with where it's actually going now, though, is this, right? So it's kind of like that's how they bring it into the real, like, applicable 3D world, but then help us bridge beyond that. Because if they bring in concepts and understandings that they can't ground into our reality, after a while, it's hard for us to hang on to them because we have no reference point in our reality. Because we live in a 3D reality, even though we are moving into 5D consciousness, we're still in a 3D reality in the most simplest way to explain it. So we need those tangible reference points because it helps us be real in this reality, even though our reality is changing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the two words there that really stood out to me is discernment. The practice of still going to resonance to when engaging with this sort of information or information of these forms, but then also the grounding that really resonated. That it's kind of like we have to bridge the gap, right?
Yeah.
It's to jump to that next state of consciousness without fully grounding it in our here and now and being in the third dimension. There isn't that bridge to walk from here to there. Does that all kind of resonate or at least
No,
parallel
it
what?
does. Yeah, it does. Because, like, here's a concept they were showing me as you were speaking. We know that eventually we should have the ability to self-heal anything. Because if it's within consciousness, what we need to do, and Spirit explained this to me, to heal something, say there's a tumor, okay? Say there's a tumor, and the tumor essentially is different elements or different particles arranged in a certain way. And to heal them, we can use sound frequency, either created within ourselves or outside of us, to move the ether, which ether is what bonds the particles together, right? So between every particle, there's an ether bond. It is the ether that can change the structure and the form of whatever this tumor is or disintegrate it. That happens in the ether. The ether responds to sound frequency. So technically, if we created a tone, could we not then self-heal or dismantle a tumor? Yes, technically. However, we need to bridge that gap by having the full body belief and understanding of it, that it is possible, and the how. Right? It's the same with levitation. It's the same with telekinesis. It's even, if we bring it back, even in mediumship. So often, like, anybody can learn to be a medium, but you need to learn the tangible ways of how to raise your frequency in order to connect with those in the higher realms. Yeah. Otherwise, you can't do it. And until you know how to do this, even though you know this is possible, technically, you need to know this process. And so that's that bridging that you're talking about, right? Like, and that's what, like, Spirit, for example, like I said before, when they're like, it's all frequency. When you're low frequency, you're here. When you're high frequency, you're here. Me understanding that, I learned, oh, so all I need to do is learn how to purposely raise my frequency? And they're like, yes. And then that's how I started to be able to tune in when I wanted and tune out when I wanted. That's that bridging of tangible reality and spirit.
Understanding the how.
The how. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know I gave you a couple different examples there, and like ether is a whole other, like that's an entire podcast of its own. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's the how. And fortunately, there's a lot of written knowledge on this planet and 3D knowledge that can give us insights to the how to then
Hmm.
apply the higher principles as to how we can adjust them to really make it happen.
And we can also get that how from spirit as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the full body belief and the how together.
Hmm.
That's the catalyst.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, let's talk about the full body belief. How do we integrate that?
That's a good one. That, so my guides are showing me, they're like, that tends to have to come with experiences. So ideally, incremental experiences. So what the spirit world will often do is give us like incremental experiences that build on top of each other to then give us a full picture understanding of something. Because what happens oftentimes is when we have, if we're just given like, if we're in a state of normal me to then full experience and understanding, sometimes that is so much that our rational brains can't take it all in and therefore shut it down.
Mm,
And so they will usually try to build on incremental experiences, which is why a lot of spirit work takes time. It takes practice. It takes repeated uh, practices, sacred practices, all of that kind of stuff. So incremental experiences is what they're saying, is how you get to understand that. Because by the time, say you have 10 experiences, the first experience, you're kind of like, whoa, what's this? Second one, you're like, oh, yeah, I kind of remember this. Okay, what's going on? Third one,
yeah.
it progresses a little more. By the 10th one, you're like, yeah, I know how this goes. I know I need to do this and I need to do this. And that becomes then a known experience. And when you
Mm,
hit that point of known experience is when you get to replicate it. That makes sense. So, like, if I bring that back to mediumship for me now, I know what it feels to be in the state of connecting in with spirit. I know what it feels like when they come forward. I like these are all known things, which
yeah.
makes it possible. But it took a lot of incremental experiences to get to that.
Incremental experiences that are building on each other.
Hmm.
And I guess what I'm getting from that is there's still this process of expanding beyond what was known prior. But I guess what I'm getting is that you don't just go from 0 to 100. You're kind of gradually expanding.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, think about like what society has been doing already, even just with health and wellness, right? Like 50 years ago, there was no correlation to the mental impact of stress created in the mind on the body.
Whoa,
Okay.
let's just take a minute. 50 years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's not long.
no. And
Yeah,
they
okay.
they they didn't relate it. Now, look at how much knowledge is out there of how stress creates illness. And by changing your mental state, your mental inner talk, whatever it may be, how you can super change your body's well-being.
Hmm.
Right? So that has come through incremental experiences and understanding to the point where now we can be like, yeah, science can prove that this and this and this is true. Whereas 50 years ago, they would have just been like, no, your body's a machine. Put a band-aid on it or take this medicine, like simple, clear-cut responses. But now we are in a place where we can understand the energetic connection between it all.
Hmm.
That makes sense?
Yeah, it definitely does. And then what's coming through is that the as more and more individuals kind of expand into this awareness, it becomes more accessible to us.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Spirit always calls this the collective soup when they're talking to me.
Soup.
The collective soup that everybody can eat from. And like everybody can have a ladle of soup when they want. And it's in there. And it is exactly that. The more each and every one of us awaken to our true selves and what we're meant to be doing here and just living open-mindedly, the more of that energy is in that collective soup. And we drink from that soup every day, right? Like we don't realize we do, but the energetics we're in are of that soup. And
Yeah.
all of these potentials are continually put in there. And so it's a very powerful thing we're creating right now, but it requires every single person in their energy of wholeness to be bold enough to be who they're meant to be, who they want to be. So yeah, that they talk about that all the time.
I think I really want to hear you draw this connection because you just ended there on this note of being who we are, being who we're meant to be. Draw me the connection between that and what we're referring to expanding beyond borders.
Okay, so okay, I love this. We are at such a significant juncture point right now in human evolution on this planet, moving from a limited 3D view of just a global community. I mean, half the time we're only looking at like country-based communities, right? But we'll say global community, to stepping into the recognition that we are a galactic community. We're part of a galactic community. The solar systems, the galaxies, there's a bazillion of planets out there. Again, everyone can have their own judgment. Probability speaking, the likelihood of us being the only inhabited planet in all the billions of planets is probably low, which therefore would mean there are probably other worlds, right? So with that being said, as we're moving into this galactic level of awareness, bridging beyond just a global community, with that galactic level of awareness comes a much higher level of consciousness. And this level of consciousness has greater abilities for healing, greater abilities for renewable energy, greater abilities in time travel and in interdimensional travel, so many other things. But in order for the whole population of Earth, or Earth as a whole, to fully get there, because we're in a big split right now, everyone has to, not everyone, there has to be a high potential or percentage of people in their full light. And that doesn't mean you have to do it perfectly, but it means standing in their own resonance of knowing what is true for them, of being who they want to be, not being limited by preconceived notions of fear or limitation or being subdued, right? Mm-hmm. It means we need to step into a higher level of open-mindedness where all things are possible. And I mean that in terms of science, in terms of spirituality, in terms of economics. Like there's so many ways where we are awakening in consciousness. It's not just spiritually speaking. And so when each individual person does that, they bring that frequency resonance back to that collective soup, which makes it more possible for others to then kind of awaken and come into that higher frequency. And then that creates that high percentage of people, which allows us to really fully embrace this 5D level of consciousness on the planet, which makes more things possible.
How much of this process is happening naturally, and how much does it require our active participation and effort in order for that process to take place?
Oh, that's a great question too. What I would say is majority of us have come here with a knowing of it in our blueprint, whether that's like a subconscious knowing, but it's like kind of written in the blueprint. However, as with all things, it's a co-creation. So we have to co-create. We can't just have consciousness lift us or spirit lift us. Like we are sovereign beings also having an embodiment, and we also need to do our part to heal the traumas that hold us back and hold generations back, to think outside the box and break down barriers that keep certain economic things in place that maybe don't benefit people anymore. We need to be the change makers, and to be the change makers, we need to think outside the box and do something different and new. And so that takes each person being in their own sovereign truth, bringing their light in whatever their soul specialty is. And that's why, like, for me, it's talking about spirit and consciousness. For others, it might be new initiatives in medicine, right? Like we're seeing new sound healing ways and new light healing modalities coming through. Other people, it's bringing through different political reforms or ideas or things. Like there are people stepping up in different places to bring these new ideas to help shift this. So that requires doing. And just have spirit heal us. We need to be a part of it. So there is a
Yeah.
big responsibility on each and every one of us, but the spirit world is also, and the universe, really co-creating with us. So like when we step, they step, and they are with us every step of the way.
I feel like you've done such a great job of acknowledging both the physical component of, let's call it, awakening, and the more spiritual and internal process. And what I mean by that is that what I'm hearing is that this process that we are undergoing, that our planet is undergoing, it requires both an awakening in our consciousness that happens beyond just doing, but there certainly is a part for us to play in the co-creation of this physical world.
Absolutely. My guides say it all the time. Like they want to know what people think. What is it like for us on this planet? They want to know what our ideas are, where we're struggling. They also, though, want us to take responsibility in our choices and our healing and step out of victim mentality rather and move into conscious choice mentality, right? Like there is that personal responsibility of being a human on this planet, but it
Hmm.
works in such a beautiful flow with the universe.
There's a term that you used earlier, and I knew we were going to address that. And I think it's gonna be brought into to what we're speaking about here. But I want to take it back to this um, soul blueprint. It's a term I've heard you use before. I know coming back to, and maybe this is where we can start to tie in some of what you learned and discovered in your NDE.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think we'll start very broad. What is a soul blueprint?
Yeah, so um, Spirit showed me during my NDE that basically they took me to this point in this white room on this big giant white boardroom table, and they rolled out my blueprint. And I remember I kind of like chuckled a little bit because it looked like a blueprint, like architect blueprints, but there was this solid line down the center, and there was different kind of juncture points along the way. And what happened was we did a life review up until the very point at which I was standing with them at the table there of everything I'd done. And then they said, that was when they asked me if I wanted to stay or come back. And I was like, oh, I definitely want to come back. Like I have more I want to do. And they said, okay, if you're coming back, then you can rearrange things in what's left of your blueprint. And I remember thinking, like, really? And it looked like almost fuses in a fuse box of different significant soul lessons I wanted.
Mm,
And they said you can replace any of them, but you won't consciously remember any but the first one. And so I remember the first one I pulled out was chronic health issues because I was often just chronically ill with stuff. And I remember pulling that out and thinking, are you serious? It's as simple as this? And they're like, yes. And I put it down and took a different one and put it in. I was like, really? And they're like, yeah. And I
yeah.
remember I kind of didn't believe them. I was like, sure, we'll see. We'll see when this happens, right?
Yeah.
Because I was the person that would get sick. Anyone had the sniff of a cold, I would get it. I would get their flu. I would just get anything, right? And what I learned in that was that we do that before we come into a lifetime. We
Mm,
sit with our counsel, and I call them my counsel, spirit guides, family members, and decide in our blueprints, we kind of design the template for our life of, what are some soul lessons we want to learn in this lifetime? What are things you want to take on? What did you, from different past lives of yours, what would you like to rehash or what are you ready to let go of? And you design a template for your life. And then you go through that. And what's really neat is when we are in alignment of our resonance, we are in greater flow and we're moving within that line of our blueprint. When we completely deviate and we fall completely off course is when we are so out of alignment with our blueprint. And that's when life is just a chaotic mess because we're out of alignment. And the soul desires to be back into alignment. And that's where
mm,
that healing comes in and taking that accountability for self comes in because it's bringing you back to your alignment. And so that soul blueprint is actually such a neat thing. And I have to say, when I came back and over the next couple of years, I noticed I did not get sick easy at all. Like if the kids got a flu, I wouldn't get it. the kids got a cold, I wouldn't get it. And I was like, what? Because everyone knew me as like the canary in the coal mine. Like I'd be the first one to go down with anything, right? And so it was very, very tangible for me. And so there's something to be said for the soul blueprint in that any of the repeated cycles that people are noticing in their life that they can't quite figure out or just can't get rid of, there's a lesson to be had there. There's healing to be had, there's understandings, there's wisdoms to be gained. And until it's completed, it will continue to cycle. So that's why the key is going into it. What is the trigger? Why is it coming up for you? What can you learn, heal, and change about it? Because when you do, you kind of get to release that soul journey piece because you've gained the wisdom of that thing and go forward.
And you would say that it's the lesson being learned that allows for us to transcend that cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so that just opens up so many questions, which I'm hoping I'll get to ask at least a few of them.
Yeah.
But I think I just want to hear more about the experience, if there's anything more to the story of just what the NDE was like for you,
Mm-hmm.
and what came through for you in those moments. And then, yeah, I'm sure I have a ton of questions to ask.
Yeah, sure. So my NDE happened in a routine surgery, and I didn't die on the table. I'll explain this. I had the opportunity to. So leading up to the NDE, I was severely weakened. And what I was told later was that I was weakened to the point where it would be easy if I chose to stay. They would almost like flick a switch and I would just have a heart attack and I wouldn't be revived. Which is why when I looked at my blueprint, I could still see this iridescent kind of pulse moving through my blueprint, which I knew I was still alive, which was interesting. But anyways, I remember when they wheeled me into the operating room, I felt the most excitement ever. And I was like I'd had surgery before. I was never excited for surgery. And I was so excited. I felt like a kid waiting to go down a water slide. Like, you know, when you're sitting there and you're just waiting, you're like, is it my turn? Is it my turn? And they put the mask on me and I was like out of there. And I found myself walking up this kind of grassy hill. And here's the neat thing. Having already been a medium for a dozen years before my NDE, I had had so many conversations with spirits about their death and all this, and I would always be shown things, and I'd astral traveled and all of this. But there is something completely different when you are on the other side. It is completely different. It's a totally different frequency, and I've never been able to be on the other side like that. Anytime I've walked a soul close to the other side, I can't get closer than 3 steps to that doorway, and then my soul is propelled back earth side. This one, as soon as my feet hit the grass and I was bare feet, I knew where I was. And I knew where I was in the same way that, like, say you've always imagined going to Egypt your whole life, and you look at the pictures and you watch the videos and, you know, you talk to people from there and you eat the food. But when you finally land there and your feet are on the ground in Egypt, like, you know where you are. It's totally different. And it was like that. And I was walking up this grassy hill, bare feet. And I remember I could, from where I was standing, zoom in on the blade of grass if I wanted and see it perfectly. And then like zoom out. And I remember the sky was just that beautiful summer blue sky. And I walked upon this like summer barbecue picnic scene. And it was so lovely. And I saw all these souls of people I've known in this lifetime and beyond. And I knew them all as if like no time had passed. And I had time to spend with every single one of them. Like, it's hard. People have asked me, like, well, how long did you spend there? I mean, my surgery wasn't very long at all. But my experience on the other side was like, felt like at least 24 hours, right?
Wow.
But doesn't correlate to this time. And so I spent a lot of time there, just reunions and what have you been up to and what are you doing now? And it was just so lovely. And then my grandmother, who'd passed already, took me to this white room of the blueprints, is what I call it, which looked like it was kind of at the edge of the universe. And it was all white with that boardroom table, and I had my counsel. And so, like I said, we went through the blueprint. I readjusted some things. And then after I'd readjusted things, they asked me again, they said, are you sure you want to stay or go? And I remember I could see my higher self standing in front of me. My higher self looked like I do now, but it was my higher self. And I knew it was my higher self, and it felt separate from me. At the same time, I was also my higher self looking at the me that's talking to you right now, feeling separate, but yet also the same. And it was normal. There was
Mm.
nothing like, there was no part of me that was like, whoa, what's happening? It all made sense. And I remember when, when I saw how much my higher self absolutely loved and valued this human lifetime and how much our souls value our human existence. Like when we come in to be a human, our souls, our higher selves are like, yeah, you go get it. Like we got your back here. Go, we got you. We will bring you everything we can. They're so invested in it that I was like, well, absolutely, I'm coming back. Like, of course I am. And so that was when I made that deal or that pact. That's a better way to say it. I made a pact with my guides that I would start to speak about what I know and share and bring their messages through for those that have the ears that want to hear it. And then it was interesting because then it was just time to come back. And I heard the nurse in the recovery room say, Ginette, are you awake? And I felt my energy go like back into my body. I didn't even open my eyes yet. And normally I'm very comical after surgery. It doesn't take a lot of medicine to make me really loopy, right? So normally I don't make any sense. And I remember my higher self in instant clarity. Like again, I just popped right back into my body. I could still sense my grandmother with me in spirit. And I said to the nurse, I need you to stop and I need you to write something down for me. My eyes were closed and I was clear and I was listening to this. And I was like, I'm a medium and I need you to write down these 4 things. And then I need you to fold the paper up and put it into my hand. And these 4 statements, which wouldn't really make sense to anybody, they were trigger points for me. I have them framed up here. They would help me remember everything. And so she folded it up, put it in my hand, and then she asked me, how's your pain? And I could just kind of barely, express what I was feeling. They wheeled me into recovery and I gave the paper to my mom and I said, like with one eye open, I said, hold this, don't lose it. And it wasn't until a couple days later when I had no pain meds in my body and I was sipping a cup of coffee and Spirit was like, it's time to look at the paper. And so I went and I looked at the paper and everything flooded back to me in clarity. And I knew something had happened. Like I had this different serene feeling of being on earth after my surgery. But everything flooded back. And I remember I was recovering at my parents' house at the time and they were in the backyard and I hobbled out there and I said, I have to tell you a story. And my mom actually captured a picture of me telling them for the first time my story of everything I saw. And so that was my near-death experience. And I want to say too, though, like I tell this story and I was just absolutely exhilarated to come back to Earth and to be here and bring everything. But it took about a year, maybe longer to integrate back because the energy on the other side is so balanced and harmonious. Like it is joyful and it is bliss. And something I find like bliss often on earth seems like something in excess, like you're blissed out, you're excessively happy. But bliss on the other side is this absolutely balanced state and harmonious state of being. And that's how I felt on the other side. And to come back to earth and then feel the density and the hurt people cause people and the density of emotions we experience and the traumas people carry and the heaviness that is here gave me more perspective of why our higher selves and spirit wish to help us in every way possible, because it is not an easy journey being on earth. It's a very polarized, highly emotional journey, but it is so valuable in the amount of wisdom we gain. And so, being a couple years now removed from it, it is one of the best experiences I've had in my entire life. And every time I get to tell the story, it is so vivid in my mind. And it like almost brings me to tears in a truth way, like something so pure. It's the only way I can explain it, that I wish to be able to share bits and pieces if that can help inspire people to why they're here, what's on the other side, and how much they matter. Yeah.
That's some story.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. I'm gonna just take a moment to really fully receive it. If we could know how much our higher selves value these human lifetimes.
Mhm. It's massive. It's so massive. They want nothing but to support us, and they try all the time. Um, they have the deepest respect. They and spirit, I want to say, like even in the galactic level of beings that I talk to, have so much respect for souls inhabiting on Earth, especially during these massive change points right now, because of how polarized it is and how deeply cut the duality is, and how much people right now are doing the healing and are doing the changing and are meeting the
Mm,
darkness and are being the light. It is a really challenging time, and they like respect it. Like there's solid respect and admiration for all of us. It's quite beautiful.
yeah. And I just want to acknowledge everyone that's hearing this that I know is also doing this work and confronting their shadows in this intention of healing and transforming themselves and our entire planet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If there's bliss on the other side, as you say, why does our higher self value these lifetimes?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And I've had people ask me that a lot, like why would anyone come back? And what's funny is even when I've had, like we talked in the beginning, challenging times will continue to come up, right? So even since my NDE, when I've had times where I've really challenged, like, what am I doing here? Like what it's funny because I'll do this thing where I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, and then I'm like, well, I already went to the other side and I already decided to come back. So I'm kind of stuck here. I have to be here. Um, there is something so profound on a soul level with having a human experience, because the amount of wisdom we gain in a single human lifetime is hugely significant. Huge.
Mm,
When souls have experiences in, say, higher timelines or different galactic areas of higher consciousness, there's still learning that happens. But when a soul is willing to have a lesson in a denser um, consciousness, level of consciousness, they're willing to take on more opportunities to learn. And so they get more. It's kind of like somebody that just goes to the gym for fun versus someone that decides to throw themselves into boot camp. Someone
mm,
that goes to the gym will get some rewards and benefits, but someone that throws themselves into boot camp is going to get more than just physical change. They're going to learn their true grit. They're going to learn where their will is. They're going to learn
mm,
how to come back when they feel broken. They're going to
mm,
learn teamwork. It's going to be so much harder, but they're going to gain so much more that like is it becomes a template on that soul. That's what human lives do when we are conscious in them. When we are unconscious in them, we tend to continue to create karma or repeated lessons. However, I know some people listen to the word karma and they don't agree. Whatever term you want to call it, lessons that aren't learned remain lessons that need to be learned,
oh,
right?
mm-hmm,
And so when we are conscious about it and taking in everything we can, we then arrive at our juncture point to the other side with minimal, if no baggage,
mm-hmm,
right? If we show up with a whole ton of baggage, we have to leave the baggage at the door and pick it back up when we come back in some other shape or form.
mm-hmm. And being conscious through these experiences and lessons that we're learning, what does that look like?
Again, not running from them, right? So like whatever the biggest thing Spirit's always said is whatever triggers you, ask yourself why. Why does it trigger you? And if you find the trigger point is pointing away from you, blaming someone else, to then ask again, why? Why do you feel you want to blame them? What can you do about it? What can you learn? What can you change? What can you heal? Every time we do that, we open up more space for consciousness to have opportunity to stretch and breathe. When we don't have space, consciousness gets stuck. And so it's imperative at this time that people step in and open up and heal, because it's changing the frequency of our planet. Every time somebody heals something, it goes back into that collective soup we were talking about, and allows an opportunity or a path to healing that may be inspired in somebody else.
Mm-hmm. I think I want to hear you speak to your definition, if you will, for heal.
Heal. Oh, I don't think I've ever had anyone ask me that. What's my definition for heal? You know, it brings like a warm smile to my face and like warmth through my heart. And I think to heal means to have gained the understanding of it for you, whatever it was, and for it to become a piece of wisdom that you then can share with another. And I think when you can share with another, you become the healer, right? Or the opportunity as a healer. You go from needing healing to then healing to then allowing opportunities as the healer. Not that we ever heal anybody else, but our words, our wisdom may be that thing that allows somebody else to transmute from being in healing to healed and then becoming the healer.
That's a very unique and powerful definition for heal. And just to bring it all together, we would have had to go through that challenge, aka that lesson, in order for us to fully embody and integrate that in order to express it and to give a beautiful. Wow. This has been so potent. There's definitely one more kind of just trajectory that I want to make sure that
Mm-hmm.
we address, if not for just my own curiosity. Um, Coming back to the soul blueprint, right? So what I've heard so far is that we've kind of mapped out um I guess actually I'll also clarify, is it us, is it our soul that is choosing the lessons that we are setting out to learn in these lifetimes?
Yes, in connection with our council or our guides, our guardians, whatever anyone's term is, it's kind of like everyone gathers and is like, what are the best lessons to take on at this time? And the soul does, as I understand, get kind of the final say. And some people will choose to take on too much and they can't quite get it, right? And the next time they might take on less. But there's always counsel in what we choose to take on. But it really comes from a reflection of our life review. So when we finish a life, we go through a life review, and in that life review, and I've seen it many times with spirit and then had my own experience in it, is we will see, hear, and feel the way in which we lived our lives from our perspective, but also from those we affected, both good and maybe not so good. And it gives us perspective. It's not about shame or judgment or hurt. It's about understanding. And it's from that point of understanding that when we're ready to come back in, we take all of the reviews we've ever done in all our lifetimes and bring them to the table and think, okay, what is our next best journey? Where are we best suited? And then we go from there. So as much as we want to sometimes in anger or sadness or grief, blame something outside of us, we had a big hand in the co-creation of our journey.
Would you say that growth is the underlying intention beneath the lessons that we're choosing and how we structure this blueprint?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't think this would go here, but there's always been this idea that I've kind of, when it comes to when it comes to soul growth, there's something there that I feel just personally wants to be reconciled. And it's this, that, if, and if at any point you don't agree with what my perspective, let me know, because then
Yeah.
there might be room for alignment.
Yeah.
But, my idea is that in our fullness, we are all that is. We are the infinite. So the idea of a soul needing to grow in some way, whereas we already are all that is,
Mhm.
um, how do you fit these two notions, these two perspectives together?
That's a great question. So, and I've asked my spirit guides this many times. So, what they've explained to me is that, like, if you picture, okay, when you put oil on water when you're boiling pasta, put some oil in the water, right? And the oil at first is a big blob, and then it starts to divide into like smaller oil droplets, right?
Hmm.
So that big blob would be considered like source energy. And we are all offshoots of that. We are when they turn into different droplets. And so that one droplet that can reconnect with that source energy, when it is a singular droplet, that is your whole soul, right? Which can connect back in with source, but it is also a whole soul. And so picture that whole soul like a pie, right? Like a pie chart. And when you're coming into a human life, one slice of that pie is going to come down for incarnation. The rest of it is connected into that higher self, whole soul, everything that is you. And so all of that is what goes into creating that soul fragment journey. And then when the body dies, the soul connects back in to the entirety of everything it's been.
Hmm.
So the soul is the entirety, but the soul will essentially give fragments of self to have various experiences. And that's in a singular way. We could then look at it from a multi-dimensional view and see that that one slice of pie that's coming into an incarnation is actually divided into many different parallel,
Hmm.
multiple dimensional realities for experience.
Hmm.
So it is all about reconnecting, but it's also like fragmenting out in certain aspects for different journeys. But we are always connected to the whole soul, which is infinite, but wishes
Yeah.
to express and learn through experiences, which is also why, because we are all a part of Source, we are also connected to Source. We are Source.
Yeah.
But when we separate, we become the individual soul source,
Mm.
which then becomes a piece of human life right now, which
Yeah.
then reconnects those. So it is all connected. That makes sense?
The analogy and visual works really well for me. I think I'll just kind of add to that, that at that soul level, I'll use the word unique experience and a unique perspective being had that, let's say, is separate from other souls. And from at that layer of perspective, yeah, we are still having our own unique experience, learning our own unique lessons, even at that soul level.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then coming back to the blueprint, it all makes sense. We've set out these lessons that we're setting out to learn in these human lifetimes. How does free will fit into this?
Oh, so beautifully. And I'm so glad you asked this question. So this is that combination of like destiny versus free will, right? Blueprint versus free will.
Hmm.
Blueprint is a template for core things our soul wishes to learn. And free will is our conscious choice to maneuver that blueprint. So if our blueprint was a river and free will was a boat, we are driving that boat and we can choose to go flow with the river. We can choose to burn all our gas to try and go against the river. We can stop at the side. We can beach it. We can do whatever, but we have our soul blueprint. So free will, kind of like I was talking about before, when we deviate really far based on free will choices, we will feel disharmonic. When we use free will choices in greater resonance with what feels right for us, we will be in more harmony. Both are allowed.
Mm.
Yes, free will is absolutely always allowed. That is our conscious choice, our co-creative choice as human beings, as souls embodied here. is to choose what we want to do at any given time. So they go hand in hand.
Is it always in our best interest to act in accordance with our blueprint?
The reason why I pause is because first answer would be, well, it was of your design in the highest light for your soul's journey based on all your soul's journeys. So it's most likely a pretty decent plan, right? Most likely.
At least better than
However,
the ones that we can likely
yeah,
consume.
right? However, I do know sometimes people, like I said before, take on a lot in their blueprint, and maybe their counsel suggested against it, but they take it on anyway. And there is so much they can't fulfill that blueprint, right? And so then maybe in that case, acting against it or just pausing or refusing to learn lessons from that point forward could be of benefit to them. I don't know, because I think at that point it becomes very individual. It's so dependent on the situations, the soul, what's happening, what is the life force of that soul, all this kind of stuff. Traumas and hurts can really cause someone to deviate from a blueprint. So it's a hard answer to just say yes or no, if I could put it that way.
Yeah, I embrace that answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I think I have two more on this trajectory. To what level of detail does this blueprint entail? Now, I've heard so far that it's the lessons that where you've set out to learn. Does it get more specific than this?
My experience with mine was it's so I can only speak from what I've seen. So when I've seen other people's blueprints, it has been fairly similar to mine. Maybe that's because of the mental picture and understanding, and spirit keeps using that. But the blueprint has these general kind of like fuse points of desired lesson pieces, like soul wisdom pieces it wants to accomplish. And within that, we can free will everything we want in there. So I think some people's blueprints would maybe be jammed full of specificity and fuse points, and others may just have a few. I think
Hmm.
again that comes to like very individualized soul journeys. But to me, when I look at them, they are more simplified than um, us complicating it. However, I will say, when I have seen, so before Spirit showed me the blueprints in my NDE, before my spirit guides used to show me people's life journeys like a tapestry. And they would say this person's journey is like a tapestry. And they would show it more at the end of someone's life. So on the front, you would have this beautiful picture, but on the back, you would see all the crisscrosses and bends and twists and turns this person took to create the tapestry that is their life.
Mm.
Right. And so the living of it, I think, is the very complex, crisscrossing, detailed all these points based on every moment being free will. But I
Yeah.
think the basic outline and template is more simplified as of my understanding of today.
Yeah.
And that could change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The two things that I draw from that is one, it can vary, and two, there's that free will of maneuvering within those lessons that might be a little bit more specific. Now, I guess that doesn't really say if that was in the blueprint or not.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think just kind of embracing that one, it can vary, and two, do we really need to know?
Yeah, I know, right? Like, I mean, yes and no. So, yeah.
Yeah, because again, I mean, we bring it back to, I think, the main message here, moving in accordance with the flow, and that I might go as far to say is always in our best interest to move
Mhm.
in tandem with life's rhythm, and allow
Yeah.
ourselves that ease and grace on that journey.
Yeah.
Um, One last maybe fun question on this note. Let's see what comes through. You were given this opportunity to change your blueprint while you were on the other side. Do you think it's possible for us to change our blueprint while incarnated?
Yeah, I've had people ask me this a lot too. And um, Spirit says it is in some ways. Um, hold on, let me just ask them how they want to answer this because I mean, I could come from every angle. So just give me one sec here to tune in. So, okay, they're saying, I pause only because they're showing me so many different things that essentially say the same thing. And so what that is the blueprint is set for a certain reason and soul desired experiences based on everything the soul has gone through before. We have great power when we notice these cycles, the continual things that happen that aren't mended in closing up soul desired junctions that we no longer wish to experience, right? So say alcoholism is one of them in a I'm very much simplifying it, not to belittle it, but if alcoholism is an issue, healing and mending and changing that will help heal and mend that juncture point, right? I'm not saying that's just simple and easy, but
Yeah.
At the same time, though, if a soul moves through certain lessons, it can then take on new kind of junctures. It can like create new soul lessons that may be of like higher frequency experiences versus more challenging experiences. So the soul can do that also and kind of take on more. And then, though, the other thing Spirit is saying, you can also look at, and this is where I was pausing for a while, you can look at your soul blueprint from a very multi-dimensional level and pull from the experiences of your past, present, parallel, future versions of self to rearrange things in your soul blueprint. And that's why I was like, okay, but that's getting complex. They're saying essentially,
I like complex.
yeah, they're like, there's many ways to skin a cat. And then I said to them, well, that's not something I'm probably going to say because that sounds rude. And they're like, but you understand the language. So there's many ways to maneuver a soul blueprint.
Yeah.
Nothing is off limit.
Yeah.
Anything is possible, but desired lessons are there because they are desired.
Hmm.
So does that make sense? That's why it was like, yeah, there's pieces.
It's all deeply resonating. Yeah, it feels good for me. Actually, it really echoes. So when you took that moment to tune in, I closed my eyes and I found that stuff was coming through for me too. And what came through for me was not creating separation between us and our higher selves, right? If we made these decisions from our higher self source perspective, which is us, why limit ourselves in believing that we aren't capable of creating the very thing that we created? So I think there's something to be said about both playing the human game,
Yeah.
but then also being open to the possibility that we are the very beings that chose to be here. And just like we had the power to create for ourselves the blueprint that we did to have a sort of life experience that we desired, I think we are well in our infinite power to create the life that we desire.
Yeah, I agree. I really do. Yeah.
Ginette, I have one last thing for you. I know I've said that before,
No,
but
that's
this, I
okay.
promise, is the final one. I'm ready to bring you into the ascending round.
Okay.
These are a couple quick fire, quick answer questions for you to bring this all to completion. It's been so powerful up until now, and I'm sure what's going to come through here is going to be as well. Are you ready to get into it?
I'm ready. Yep.
Yeah. First one is, if you can get everybody in the world to read one book, what would it be?
Most likely The Alchemist.
I just picked it back up 2 days ago.
Did you?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's sitting on my bed.
it just, yeah, that book just has so many layers. And I mean, there's so many books I could list of strong candidates, but The Alchemist really spoke to me about the journey, and there's layers in the language there. You can read it on so many different layers. It
Yeah.
just like speaks to the journey, like the journey of self, and how sometimes you might think you're doing a very 3D journey, but you realize, wow, was this ever a massive catalyst of change, right? So The Alchemist.
You've just gotten me all the more excited for it. Beautiful. Next question is, what one practice or perspective have you been integrating in the past 6 months that has had the greatest impact on you?
Gratitude, daily gratitude. Like I make
Mm,
a point of it, daily gratitude. And it helps me. So every morning, this is my little thing. Every morning I wake up before everybody else is really awake. I grab my coffee, I get back in bed. I sit in bed with all the lights off and I can look out the window and I just sit there with the warmth and I think of what I'm grateful for. And sometimes it's my bed because it's comfy and cozy and I feel lucky. Other times it's things I'm doing or projects I'm working on. And then I'm like, I'm grateful for life, like for living life. And I find what started as just a morning practice really started to echo into interactions, whether they were good ones, maybe not so good ones. I could always pull something positive. Well, what did that teach me? What did that teach me? And so that gratitude every morning has actually played into so many other things. And it's just simple. So it's just three things I'm grateful for as I drink my coffee. But to me, it's like so deeply spiritual. So.
yeah, beautiful. Next question is, what does it mean to ascend?
Mm. I personally think ascending means to step into higher states of open-mindedness. And I'm specifically saying open-mindedness instead of consciousness because I think people's journey into ascension is by opening their mind. And sometimes it starts in very 3D ways. Maybe it's opening their political view to considering the opposition just because you might not agree with it, but you're willing to just see it from their perspective. That's just opening your mind. And when we start to be able to open our mind to different things, we inadvertently awaken our consciousness and ascend and grow. And so I think at the very root of it, when we start to be able to open our mind to something more.
It's always so amazing to see how there's always a variety of answers that come through for a question like that. But I gotta say that one was probably one of the most unique.
Ah, all
Yeah.
right.
Uh-huh. Next question then is, how do we ascend?
Hmm. I would say by challenging yourself to see other perspectives.
Mm,
I really think like challenge yourself. Like, what do you dislike about this thing? Well, what else could you learn from it? If you were in the shoes of that other thing, person, experience, what would it be like for you? Like, challenge yourself wherever you are like grading on something. Not even like a trigger, but anywhere where you have like a hard no or a hard stop or a something. Challenge yourself to just energetically put yourself in the shoes there, just for perspective. You don't have
well,
to agree. And that, when we can start to put on other people's shoes just to try them on, that can open up our minds huge. I really believe that.
I absolutely love that. I've been training myself to when I'm resistant to a point and a perspective, training myself to pay more attention in those cases.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. Um, I have There's one more question in the ascending round,
Yeah.
but before I ask you the big grand finale question, it's my favorite question on the show. I do want to give you an opportunity to just share with our audience if they were interested in getting in touch with you, seeing more of your work, perhaps working with you. Are there any offerings that you can share with us?
Yeah. Basically, if they go to avalonspirit.com, there are my courses, my mediumship circles there, the cosmic consciousness circle that I talked about. If they want to go into deep dives of consciousness, it's so much fun, as well as a monthly meditation circle I do on Mondays. So that's all available on Avalon Spirit, even how to learn your spiritual gifts. But then free content is on YouTube, and I post my podcast there as well as all other audio platforms, the Ginette Biro podcast. But Ginette Biro Medium on YouTube is where I do daily card readings. There's a mediumship reading, podcasts, videos of, hey, did you know this? A lot of content there. And then Facebook is the Avalon Spirit Group, and Instagram is GinetteBiro.medium. So it's you can find me if you Google it. And there's a lot of free stuff I put out just for people if it's of interest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All links to all of that is going to be included in the show notes for easy access.
Awesome.
And good for you for putting out a daily video, did I hear?
Monday to Friday, I do a daily little insight from spirit. Yeah.
Yeah, we might need to do a second interview on how you keep up with that.
Yeah, it just, it actually flows. It just flows out. And I do part of it through cards, part of it through mediumship. And Spirit was like, you're tuning in for yourself anyway. So why not just share it? And I was like, yeah. So it actually just flows really effortlessly. I enjoy it.
Which means you're in alignment with your soul blueprint. Ginette, is the grand finale question time. You ready for the last one?
I'm ready.
Yeah. You just actualized the ability to telepathically communicate to all of humanity. What do you say?
Oh my gosh. The very first word that came out was love. Like love. Like I could only say one word, it would be love, but it would be that people not only heard the word, but like felt it. And telepathic communication is all of the clairs. So it's not just hearing it, it's like feeling it. And if they felt that source love in themselves, they would really drop a whole bunch of boundaries and barriers to their own self-judgment and then judgment of people outside of them. And I just think we would shift into a different frequency. I mean, I think there's so many things I could say. There's concepts and stories and whatever, but if I could telepathically communicate a word and a feeling, it would be that of love, and not the frilly love, not the romantic TV love, but the like love and awe and wonder of a morning sunrise. Like that moment where it's just magic in the air, but you feel it in your heart and your being, and it is love. That is what I would do.
I hope I'm not the only one that is receiving this as a beautiful invitation to feel into this frequency right now.
I love that. So good.
Thank you for being you, for all of this. This was a lot of fun and super insightful as well. I feel that there was just it was a amazing flow to interacting with you and getting to hear from you. And I just want to express my gratitude for you for answering questions the way that you do, for putting out a daily video on YouTube, and for being of service to humanity in the ways that you are. I appreciate you, and I know so many that are receiving this do as well.
Thank you. And I just have to say, your questions are so like from the depths of your being. They're not just questions because you should ask the questions. Like they are there's just this divine beauty in your energy and the questions you ask and what they bring up and how they bring up more layers. You are so skilled at what you do.
That means the world. I'm good at asking questions. You're great at answering them. Actually, on that note, I do want to share that, I, in preparation for these podcasts, I do take some time to like think of some questions. I call them my back pocket questions, not questions I'm definitely going to ask. They're just kind of there in case. I found, especially today, when my psyche, my consciousness would kind of go towards like just trying to remember what those questions were, I immediately sensed that there was like this discord in my being that's like, no, stop thinking about that. Like you don't need that. Just come back to being fully present and engaged and allow for the question to be inspired through your curiosity and your heart. And I think what you just reflected back to me was exactly that. So I appreciate you for sharing that deeply.
Amazing. Yeah. Right on.
Thank you so much for joining me on the show. Yeah, I would love for this not to be the last time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Senders, that is going to be all for my conversation with Ginette Biro. I trust that it was able to activate in you a deeper remembrance of who you are and why you're here, because, well, you had some intentions coming into this journey, and your free will choice in aligning with this could mean a greater sense of flow, alignment, ease, and joy on this journey. And this is what I'm wishing for you. Senders, before you go, if you enjoyed this episode and it has supported you in your journey, I would greatly appreciate it if you took a quick moment to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. This, again, really helps us in growing the show and continuing to create this content. I appreciate you all that take the time to show your support in this way. Lastly, think about someone that you know who is also on a journey of awakening their consciousness and share with them this episode to support them on their journey. That being said, that is going to be all for this episode of Awaken. Thank you for listening and for being who you are. Until next time, keep ascending.